An ancient bard's tale once dubbed the Firran, the children of the Gale. Firran kits learn to run before they can walk, a must for a race as restless as the wind. Usually settlers record their lives or build towers in the ground, but not the Firran. They see no need for hearth or home, and require little more than dew to moisten their throats and meat to fill their bellies. Centuries ago, when war tore Auroria, the hero Taiyang led the Firran onslaught. It's said that when he fell, slain by his best friend, the plains burst into flame in protest. When the Firran fled Auroria, they left their grief behind. The wind of their new range brushed their tears away. Other settlers were puzzled by the cat people's feral ways, especially the wealthy Harani. Their suspicions jinxed peace from the start. No Harani was ever praised for his genial nature, and the clash with the Firran came swiftly. Though the children of the Gale claimed more victories, their opponent was an entire empire, whirring with advanced technology and trained fighters. To stand against such a well-oiled machine, the Firran had to build their own empire. They called it Temi, and for the Harani, victory became even rarer. Fighting their swift, fierce opponents was like fighting a storm. The Harani backed off. Meanwhile, the Firran grew accustomed to their homestead and began assimilating Harani ways. The Harani bided their time, waiting for the Firran to forget how to fight like the wind. This time, when the Harani struck, their domination was absolute. The Temi Empire shattered like ice, sending shards of Firran back to the wilds. But the wind does not stay quiet forever. Nomads again, the Firran found strength in the plains. They left their grief in the Temi ruins and let the wind brush away their tears. Their power and might rose like a thunderhead. Hundreds of years passed. Seers announced the birth of a new great Mara. He was to lead the Firran back to the plains of their ancestors, on Auroria, just as Taiyang had prophesied. The key will be to keep the history of Temi from repeating itself. To reclaim the plains, not by building an empire, but by embracing the wild nature of the wind, by embracing the spirit of Taiyang that still lives in you all.
As the sun clawed its way above the horizon, it brought with it the dawn of your Bajan trials. This coming-of-age ceremony had been practiced by the Firran since ancient times. The elements wind, water, fire, and earth were the land's true rulers, reigning over life and death. Passing the Bajan trials meant receiving each element's blessing as a mature, adult warrior. Only a tribe's Mara could decide which Firran were ready to attempt the Bajan trials. Failing the trial was akin to spitting on this gift, then burying it like scat. The Mara may never see fit to give such Firran another chance at the greatest glory. As nomads, Firran are intimately connected with the land, the weather, and nature itself. Though they worship the wind as the ultimate god, all elements of nature are sacred, even death. The practice of necromancy is considered beyond evil. You knew of no human word that could describe the blasphemy Firran saw in raising the dead and disrupting the natural order. To Firran, every life has purpose. Weapons are blessed to sanctify necessary killings. Their wilderness home already makes danger a frequent companion. For these reasons, Firran are expected to settle disputes peacefully. Killing each other is strictly forbidden, especially during the trials. Traveling bards sang many stories about the Eye of Day. The lake was revered for its perfect reflection of the sun, the source of fire and light. Allegedly, this reflection could even be seen on cloudy days. Since fire and the sun were so important when scratching out a life on the plains, the lake was one of your people's most sacred places. The great Firran warrior Tayeng was considered the embodiment of the High Wind God. Because of his ferocity, tenacity, and skill with archery, he once journeyed to the garden, the birthplace of the world, with 11 other adventurers. The place was so full of magic, they received extraordinary powers. Some were given the duties of gods. Others, like Tayeng, ascended to the roles of epic heroes. When Tayeng passed into the sunset, his memories swept into every living Firran. They fell to their knees in his honor. Fragments of those memories remained in your people's minds, even today. You'd heard the most skilled Firran could recall more. When you shot the last spirit, it happened to you. Memories showed Tayeng firing the bow for the last time. He'd expected no victory. He martyred himself to save his race. Mist demons were summoned by Firran shaman. They were assassins who killed without leaving a trace. Memories showed you that one had been sent after Tayeng in his youth. However, a dark-haired man had saved him. Perhaps the mist demon you now faced was a similar spell gone awry. Onar was no master necromancer, or the ritual could never have been interrupted so easily. But an acolyte could have never raised as many undead as you'd seen in the valley. There had to be another necromancer at work. And a powerful one indeed. It was probably a vile Harani. They taught the Firran of necromancy in the first place. Wisps of Tayeng's memories filled you. He too had dealt with necromancy. Kyrios' army had been mostly undead. Once he'd seen the decapitated head of a necromancer transform into a bird and fly off. The undead it left behind raised their hands in supplication. Tayeng shot the bird, and the undead dissolved. When the Firran fled Auroria, flush with the horror of fighting undead armies, the Soul-Eye became treasured as a way of keeping such atrocity at bay. Its faceted surface could reveal anything tainted with death. From undead themselves to the necromancers who raised them. The most elite warriors dedicated themselves to guarding it. The Wind Whip's uniform caused more memories the world before you. Having grown up a nomad, unused to authority, Tayeng had been mistrustful of anyone in uniform. However, he'd eventually changed his mind. You saw him with a dark-haired human, both in uniform, laughing and crafting their own blades. Elter was determined to become your ally to repay you for saving her life. It reminded you of Tayeng's partner in crime. The man who'd saved him from the fog assassin and later shared his uniform. History told you the man had to be Jin, who became Kyrios, the god of destruction. However, it was hard to reconcile the friendly face you'd seen with that kind of monster. Working with the Shadowhawks triggered a flood of Tai Yang's memories from before the expedition. He and Jean had founded the Shadowhawks, calling the best and brightest from local street gangs. They enforced strict rules of conduct, brotherhood, loyalty, and honor among thieves. It seemed that the Shadowhawks had fallen far from those ideals. The City of Towers held echoes of Delphinad, though it wasn't nearly as grand. You imagined Jean and Taiyang around every corner, dodging guards or laughing with the Hawk brothers. They were happy then, before their journey to the garden, before the Great War ravaged Auroria, before Jean was corrupted by the Dread God's powers. Now that you'd infiltrated the Shadowhawks, Taiyang's memories of the group seemed strange. Back then, they'd been outlaws, but also respected peacekeepers. But in Mahadevi, ordinary citizens cowered from them. Either the Shadowhawks had forgotten their roots, or something more sinister threatened the city. As you padded through Mahadevi, you heard whispers about an evil alchemist. He seemed to be the main source of people's fears and reluctance to step outside. Rumor spoke of unwary travelers snatched from unlit alleys and replaced with mindless slaves. The Shadowhawks were a known risk, but what people fear most is the unknown. The alchemist's unsettling activities were just that. Kraft had used the Soul Eye to partially send his assistants' minds to the hereafter, leaving them with just enough to act as slaves. Taiyang had met such men. The dread necromancer, Anthalon, had committed similar atrocities. He'd even raised fallen Shadowhawks as undead servants to Kyrios. Seeing friends as undead had rent Taiyang's heart. The Shadowhawks wanted to kill you. You knew from his memories that Taiyang wouldn't approve. Not without hearing your side of the story. His Shadowhawks had been decent and loyal, criminals with rules. No wonder he'd been horrified to see them reanimated. But these Shadowhawks were little better anyway. When the Wind Whips mentioned Auroria, the fur on your neck tingled, a memory bothered your mind. You saw hundreds of Firran warriors in crimson cloaks charging into battle. Dozens of different tribes had united to battle the forces of Kyrios. Later, Taiyang overheard odd whispers about the fierce Wind Whips at the Battle of Terrena. You felt him beam with pride at the new term. Though Firran felt little connection to cities, Astera was poured about with respect. It was the only port that allowed free trade between both Haranya and Nuya. Grell urged you to keep the Soul Eye well hidden. He was probably worried about it falling victim to the port's active black market. When you killed the victim in the port, you saved his body from being used by evil. Taiyang had faced a similar choice. Kill Kyrios to save what was left of Jean? He couldn't. When Kyrios lay dying, Taiyang saved him. A fellow expedition member helped. Every petal on every flower has a reason to exist, she said. We cannot let the god of destruction die. Someday, we will need him. to enable the soul eye to be restored sooner, the Wind Whips had brought its base from its secret cave to their headquarters. Precious few Wind Whips were awaiting your arrival, however. Most were still out on patrol, having not yet received the message the soul eye had been found. Grell had been using you all along. Even Onar had been involved in his plot as one of his students, or victims. Luckily, unlike the necromancer Taiyang had faced, Grell didn't transform into a bird to escape. However, neither did he fight. He had someone else for that. You recognized the beast immediately. The creature in Shaka had featured in several of Taiyang's most horrific battlefield memories. Centuries later, it, was still alive. Taiyang had recognized the Nshaka as being one of the Shadowhawks that Anthalon had reanimated. It had turned Taiyang's stomach to see what had been done to his former hawk brother. Nshaka had only grown more hideous over time. Aside from Anthalon, Nshaka had been the most powerful mage in the army of Kyrios. Taiyang had desperately wanted to put his fallen friend to rest. As the memory flickered out, the last spirit appeared in your palm. When you finally defeated Nshaka, he didn't crumble to the floor in a mass of bleeding flesh. Instead, with a howl of pain and rage, he vanished. Grell followed suit. No longer in danger, you found yourself unable to resist collapsing from your own wounds. Little did you know, in the room beneath you, the soul eye had vanished too. Silent Forest had a long history of tragedy and magic. The trees had been watered by the blood of several wars. Tombs of ancient kings dotted the landscape. A terrible mystery was supposedly sealed under Soundless Lake. The entire forest was allegedly cursed due to a powerful mage's experiment. The place was awash with enchantment. A relic as magical as the soul eye could be nowhere but there. The Firran weren't native to Aurora, but Harania. However, after migrating to Aurora, they'd found true glory. Endless plains, vast herds of snow lions, and winds filled with strange energy. If the soul eye would help the Firran reclaim their greatest territory, it had to be found. Who better to do so than one who wielded Taiyang's bow?